Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Destiny. I'm Eddie the Chump and I've got Freeedo with me today, and we're going to be discussing the recent Destiny update, talking about PvE specifically today. We're going to do another one of these discussion videos talking about the Crucible, so look forward to that. But I just thought I'd give Freeedo the opportunity to reintroduce himself to you guys. So you want to go ahead, Freeedo?
What's going on, everybody? It's been a while. Really excited that the devs at Bungie are digging in deep into the main issues with the game, and I'm a bit optimistic after seeing these things, though obviously we wanted to give our full review of what's coming up as soon as actually next reset day on Tuesday. We're getting some goodies, and then the next week after, and the weeks and months coming after that. So slow going a little bit, but I think there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that's what I'm most excited about. So wherever we want to start, Eddie?
Okay, I think the thing I want to start with is the economy changes in Destiny 2 and quality of life, because that was one of the things that originally sparked a bit of the backlash. People didn't want to see new content before some of those changes were implemented. And I think actually they're kind of representative of the direction that Bungie are now taking Destiny 2. And they are good in a lot of ways, but I think they also create some of their own problems. So specifically, I'm talking about the new uses for legendary shards, the fact that vendors will now have gear that you can purchase with shards and tokens, and how all of that sort of macroeconomy of the game has changed. So if you don't know, you will be able to directly buy gear from vendors, and it's not just regular vendors like shacks, it's event vendors too, so faction rally vendors, Iron Banner, all that kind of stuff. And that's one of the things that people were asking for. However, we are dealing with a drastically smaller loot pool than Destiny 1 because there aren't variable roles that reset every week like Destiny 1 had with legendary marks and so forth. So you wouldn't go into the Vanguard vendor and see what role the Palindrome had this week. That's not there in Destiny 2. So although that quality of life is great because it takes away the prevalence of tokens as the main system, tokens and RNG really, it is a step forward, but I see the shallower loot pool as a bit of a problem because any hardcore player, given a short amount of time, will eventually have everything. And not even eventually, I mean pretty quickly. So these changes are a good direction, but they might result in people getting the loot that is there already quicker, which is a bit of an indirect negative, I think. What do you think, Freeedo?
Right, and I think it comes down to a philosophy of this game that I think Destiny fans are just going to have to accept is Bungie's way forward, at least for now, for the majority of the game. It seems like Masterworks is their answer to the desire to have something more exclusive, and we'll get into talking about that in a second. But to break down what you said, basically, as far as I understand it as well, a vendor will have a limited time selection of the weapons and items that would be in their engram normally, right? But on a rotation. So essentially, I don't see much of a reason to even pop those engrams, because why would you want to get a duplicate when you can save those tokens to get exactly what you want? Now, theoretically, we don't know exactly what those costs will be for everything. It could change, right? They've only shown us a few screenshots, but like Eddie said, if you're just patient enough for the rotation to go to everything you want, you pretty easily can just select what you want and not just throw tokens at the wall into the RNG abyss, and then you'll have all the major items that you need quicker than the system that we have now, which I don't know how I feel about that. I think generally, though, the good news is alongside that, there's also new items to strive for. So it seems to me like the decision that Bungie's going with is trying to make everything accessible to obtain, but try to keep up with that carrot at the end of the stick as well, because we also have these other gear sets that require basically like quest missions for you to go out, you know, winning 25 Crucible matches in the Iron Banner, for instance, for different sets of armor, and doing other mini quests in order to have sort of a completionist approach to the game. But as far as the exclusivity of some of these items, that's kind of even going to be worse in this upcoming patch. So it kind of depends what other items they add to the game, though, and how Masterworks works out. So
also another thing that sort of ties into that is the duplicate protection on exotics. So there aren't actually a fantastic amount of exotics in the game currently. And if we're really being honest, think of how many exotics are actually worthy of the name in Destiny 2. So not only do we have vendors that we can directly buy items from on a rotation, but we'll also be acquiring exotics a lot easier and a lot more directly with less duplication and all that kind of stuff. So really what's going to happen is that what they've done is they've made the route to the loot that you want, wow, that almost rhymed, a lot more direct and a lot more simplified. Now, that reveals a bit of a loot problem in the game, and we will talk about Masterworks because, yes, that is a system change in trying to make some of that loot different, trying to create a new loot tier, and the vaguest whiff of random rolls, because the Masterwork perk that, well, not perk, but stat boost that you get is random, and you can dismantle them and apply them to different guns and all that kind of stuff. But we had a bit of a conversation before we started recording about those Masterwork perks. Just like there is a meta right now in what the best perk is for a gun. So let's say for hand cannons, by far and away the best perk, in my opinion, is explosive rounds, because it makes your damage fall off, or at least half of your damage not suffer from fall off. And that's why the Better Devils, the Sunshot, that's why they're so good. Will there be an absolute meta Masterwork stat boost that is the one that you want and all the others are irrelevant? That's a bit of a problem too. So with that kind of depth system, it needs to be more impactful, I think. I think it needs to have a wider scope of the kinds of things that it can do for your weapons, and how you go about earning them has to be challenging and interesting and compelling. Because at the moment, the real problem, yes, there were system problems, but there's also a massive underlying loot problem in that Destiny 1, because of random rolls, had a huge amount of loot, and Destiny 2 doesn't because of static rolls. Now, we were looking to the mod system to have the kind of scope and power to change weapons in a very interesting and compelling way. But as they're implemented into the game now, that's not the case. I mean, a kinetic mod does nothing except boost a weapon's power level, which, let's be honest, in a lot of activities is completely irrelevant. So we are looking forward to those changes, which they didn't detail in this post, but I really feel that they have to do something drastic. Now, I don't know if they will do that, but I don't know if there's any viewer on this channel or any player of Destiny 2 that considers themselves a little bit more hardcore that couldn't see the potential inherent in there. What do you think about the mod system and what has to be done, Freeedo?
Okay, we'll talk about mods and then maybe a bit more on the Masterworks issue. Mods really excites me because I've played quite a few RPG games in my day. The one the most was Diablo 2, and something that I think could potentially make the mod system really interesting is if they somehow implemented even a smaller version of the Diablo 2 rune word system. So to try to give the fastest explanation to work towards how it could work in Destiny, imagine if a certain combination of mods could combine to give you an actual perk. So the random roll situation that everyone wants to really experiment with, say if you somehow combined 3 different legendary mods in the right order or something, then you get Firefly or any other perk that you might want to try. That kind of thing could really add that level of depth that we're talking about. Now, that's the type of thing that I want to see from the mod system, and I hope they make that leap by the time they're working on that and pushing it out next year. By that time, too, I think as well, this focus around keeping the game palatable for casual players, I hope goes to the wayside, because I don't think any of them will even still be around anyway to be lured in by this approachable nature of how they're giving things away. That's really where I hope they start to ramp up the levels of investment for the players that want to treat the game as a hobby, as they like to say.
Yeah, there was always this mention in the PR talk of when Destiny 2 was coming out and pre-release, and I should have seen it as a red flag, really, in that they were always talking about, you know, there's these base activities that everyone can play, and then there are these optional quests that hardcore players can complete. And the word optional kind of scares me, because it basically tells me irrelevant. That's what it tells me. It doesn't say these optional activities will include the new Vex Mythoclast. Like, that's not going to happen. When someone phrases something like that, it usually means, like, you can change the look of your armor by macro questing. Does it do anything? No, it doesn't. It just makes it look different. And I think that is not what hardcore players are looking for. Hardcore players are looking for investment rewards, not in terms of loot that they get. It's more abstract than that. They want the investment that they put into a game to be rewarded in the power that they have in that game. They want to feel like a superhero, right? And Destiny is about being an amazing space wizard, as I often joke. But it's true. People want to be rewarded by sinking time into this game and then having something really amazing at the end of it. And when people say optional quests for hardcore players, it does make me worry. And if we're looking for any system in the game to be that, then the only one that could have the potential at this current moment is the mod system.
Right. And I think the problem with the aesthetic things is that those, in my opinion, should kind of go without saying, right? Like, those are things that you sort of expect would be there. And then the extra layer is those few really desirable items that change up your play style or whatever. And I think no matter what, it seems like the philosophy of this game is just going to keep those in reach of everyone at all times. Now, I want to speak a little bit more on the masterclass system because I have some concerns about it. First and foremost, I do want to say something positive about it, that I think undoubtedly there will be a period of time where it's very exciting to dig through the different abilities or stats, I guess, is what they change on the different weapons, because although you can dismantle them in order to be able to apply them to whatever gun you want, there's still going to be a trial and error process of really seeing what's worthwhile and, I guess, unpacking all of the guns in the game again. So it's as if we have random rolls. The only problem is, are there going to be certain stats that are just objectively better than others, or are a lot of them irrelevant? That can very easily be the case as well, where if you just get a few stat points in reload speed, if it's not even noticeable, like right now, honestly, I think the mods don't really add a noticeable change. It's a somewhat subtle change, but it doesn't really change how you play the game, if that makes sense, or how you would play that weapon necessarily. You might feel like recoil counterbalance mod is going to be really important on certain weapons, but could you live without it as well? Yeah, kind of. So that's kind of my issue with it. It's this really small carrot on a stick that might not be as far away as we would like.
Yes, there's a factor with mods in the current system, especially on armor, if you're talking about counterbalance or kinetic counterbalance or handling speed, all that kind of stuff. The changes that those mods do are not big enough to make them worthwhile to choose over, say, like a cooldown mod, you know, on your nade or your melee, all that kind of stuff. They just don't do enough. And the reason they don't do enough is because I think Bungie are very aware of making imbalances in certain places. Like, maybe there's a really powerful gun, but it kicks too much for a lot of people. So would a recoil counterbalance mod make that gun dominant and overpowered? I'm sure they're terrified of that kind of thing. But that's exactly where they need to go. They need to make things compelling and powerful, and the meta will sort itself out. Yes, there will always be something that is pretty dominant, but the joy is not that thing in itself. The joy is experimenting with all these different powerful things that can change the way you play. And at the moment, that just isn't in the game. Now, I want to talk about Masterworks as well. I do think it's very positive. And just like mods, I think there's a massive amount of potential in that additional game system. Now, in practical ways, it does equate to just another mod. And I really like Freeedo's idea of, you know, the rune words and putting certain mods in certain orders, and then it would do something extra. So say at the moment, Masterworks give you an orb on multi-kills. Multi-kills is at least 3 kills, by the way. So that's going to be difficult to do in Crucible. But that's sort of like a passive perk that, the singular passive perk that a Masterwork weapon has. And Freeedo said before we were recording that we should see more different types of passive perks on the Masterworks weapons. So getting orbs for multi-kills isn't the only one. Maybe it's, you know, getting multi-kills regens your health, or it cools down your grenade or something like that, so that there's sort of more going on with that weapon set, and there's more experimentation. Hardcore players, I feel, want to compound the complexity to make it more interesting and to experiment and to play with things. And Bungie are very, it seems, reticent to do that because it does isolate the player that doesn't play every week and comes in like a month later and is like, wow, I can't compete with all these weapons. I mean, in PvE, it's not really a direct competition in a lot of ways, so I don't really see a problem with that state of play anyway in PvE. In the Crucible, I can understand why they're concerned about that, but the overall direction of the game being concerned for the casual player who doesn't play that much is what's led us to this place. It's what's led us to this place where the community was really upset and wanted all these changes. And yes, Masterworks are a really good step in the right direction, but how many systems in Destiny 2 have we all said, oh, there's an amazing amount of potential in that? Virtually all of them, right? Tokens aren't inherently bad. It's just the way that they were implemented. Mods have huge potential. It's just the way that they're implemented. I'm slightly worried that Masterworks might follow suit in that. And yes, it's good to have them as well, but I'll have to wait and see how actually impactful they are.
Right, and I think in the Bungie podcast that they recorded, they kind of conceded this point about not really having the complexity there for the hobbyist level players. The issue that I have, though, is that this upcoming update doesn't necessarily solve that, and until they really jump in towards that complexity, I can't really say I have any proof that there's going to just eventually become complexity. But to Destiny's credit, I have to say, this game gets compared often to Warframe. And I tried Warframe. I think it's really cool in a lot of ways, but I still prefer Destiny in a lot of ways because Destiny streamlines the experience really well. The only problem is it's streamlined so well that you almost don't get to the promised land eventually, where you just start to compound your interest in the game and you're like branching out into understanding all these different systems. Whereas Warframe is like incredibly complex and you just jump in and there's tons of things and mods do a bajillion different things and it's really complicated. And if you have the patience or the time to really put in and dig into those systems, it's really good. But Destiny, I think, is trying to get you right into the shooting, right? Because it's a game about shooting ultimately, but it's leaning a little bit too much towards just shooting, whereas it's also an RPG game too, at least we think it is, and it needs to kind of remember that aspect of it and give those knobs and things to mess with behind the scenes in between all of the blasting aliens in the face that can extend the life and the actual end game of the game.
Yeah, I think there's something really telling from the actual Bungie podcast that they talked about, in that they put players in three buckets, tourists and the other nomenclatures that they use, and they pretty much conceded that they made Destiny 2 at least with the tourist in mind. And I think, without being too impolite, I think that's a mistake. I think, why are people fans of Destiny? Well, they're fans of it because of all the deep and complex and fun questing that you can do, how powerful you can make your character, the social interaction of playing raids and how hard they are. And this sort of brings me on to their vague reference to how they're going to reward players who want to do prestige activities. So there's loads of things that aren't in the game, right? There's no strike-specific loot. There's no Lost Sector-specific loot. Actually, I tell a lie. There is one. There is an SMG. Maybe there's more than that. But it's a blue anyway. It's very good. It's called the Sondok. Everyone knows about it by now. But there's no uniqueness to the rewards for doing these things. And yes, they're bringing heroic strikes back, which is good, but it's going to do the same thing that the inventory for the vendors is going to do, and it's going to give us the loot that is there quicker. And it's great that there's harder stuff in the game, but what if there was a mod that you could only get from the Prestige Nightfall, and each Nightfall had a different mod that did something crazy, right? That made the gun that you put it on, or the piece of armor, better than an exotic, like a top tier. And you could only get it from running a specific strike that was the Nightfall at prestige level at 300. What if the raid had one of those? What if each raid layer had something at prestige that you could only get from there, and it really made a huge difference to the game? That immediately makes Destiny 2 a better game, in my opinion. Is that less friendly to the casual player? Maybe a little bit. but you can tailor what those things do to the activity that they're used in. One of the great things about Wrath of the Machine was that the weapons you got from that raid made doing that raid easier. It was directly tied to the activity that you were doing, and people really liked that. It was a good way of balancing it. Yes, not everyone gets to have these things, but they're only really relevant in this one activity anyway. So systems like that, I think, are really needed in this game, and they didn't actually outline what they were going to do with Prestige, and I think it's fair to say that they're still making up their mind about that. What do you think, Freeedo?
Yeah, I tend to agree, because we already do have some cool Prestige things to do, but like you said, it's just a faster way to get to things we already could get, and that ultimately is going to be the issue moving forward. Now, overall, I think this update is going to be the step in the right direction, but it's likely not going to be as fast as you would like, because especially if you're the type of player who has already gathered a bunch of these resources or are so high in power level that obtaining more of them isn't really done at any great cost to you, you're going to speed to the finish line even faster if you haven't already gotten there. And the rest of the content coming through is going to be the DLC, which looks to be pretty good, thankfully. But also unraveling the masterworks weapons and maybe getting the armor if you choose. But there isn't another extra bunch of layers beyond that. That's basically it for now. And until we get the next big update, we're not there yet. Every great journey starts with a single step, I suppose, and that's the one that they're on.
Yes, I really agree with that. I feel it's kind of unfortunate, but I've got this feeling, it's not a sinking feeling, but it's kind of like a cold acknowledgement that Destiny 2 will be much closer to where all of us want it to be in September, which is year 2. If you think back to Destiny 1, that was pretty much the same there. The game in year 2, at the start of year 2 with the Taken King, everyone was excited about it because it made the questing a lot more direct. It added loads to the game that was really, really fun. And I kind of feel like that's where we're going to end up. I don't know if that's quick enough for some people. Specifically for Crucible, which will be the subject of our next video. So you guys make sure you check that out. Is there anything else we want to talk about for PvE today, Freeedo? I think we've covered quite a lot.
I would say that's about it. However, perhaps one thing that we can hang our hat on is that it does seem that the fire has been lit under Bungie somewhat, so we might be able to see a bit more accelerated rate of at least communication, or if not development, on some of these things. And a lot of it, I think, is a little bit easier to make than others because they can make the already existing pipeline of stuff that they had coming just a bit harder to get or a bit more specific to get, and it would give a band-aid solution to some of these yearnings for those of us who want to be able to grind content. And that leaves us hopeful through the trickling of content for the next 6 months or so. But at the very least, I will say I do have faith that by year 2, it will be in a better place than it is now. But can we all wait that long? I hope so.
I just want to say that I can feel the wind changing. That's what this update feels like. It feels like Bungie have sat up and gone, they're really not happy, are they? And to be fair to them, they cancelled what I would consider sort of like a straight PR stream, like buy our new stuff. And we're like, actually, we've got to talk about this because the community's really not happy. So I have to give them credit for that, even though I would prefer it if those issues weren't there in the first place. I'm sure all of us would. But to give Bungie credit, they did respond quite well last week. So with all of that said, guys, I think that's going to do us for today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating. If you never want to miss another one of our videos again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. And finally, please follow the Your Destiny Twitter. You'll find information about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump. He's been Freeedo. Say bye, Freeedo.
Bye, Freeedo.
And we'll see you guys next time.